Hmm. All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Want to take this time out to thank my partner in crime, Cal One to God, for joining me once again. Cal,
Sir,
what's going on, brother?
what's up, man? How you doing? How's everything? Quick
You know,
question to you. Am I coming in clear to you?
you are perfect, man. You are perfect, man. You're not
Okay.
perfect. You're not Don Larson perfect, but you're still perfect.
Mr.
Listen,
Perfect Game himself for another
listen,
time, another day. So
listen,
what's
man.
up, brother?
Yeah, listen, man. I can't complain. I'm gonna make this short and sweet because I know you got things to do. And I got some people online, to take care of and take their money and some bid wish. You young folks don't know
Oh, that's
nothing
what's
about
up.
that.
Yeah, that's that country stuff right there. Country card playing. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? And that's all day, all night betting right there, bro.
yeah, man. No, man. But listen, I wanted to talk to you about the Los Angeles Clippers because we're looking at this team. They're 43-19.
Right,
They're third in the West.
right.
A lot of people are talking about them making a potential run. But my biggest thing is, can the Clippers be trusted? We saw this team melt down before our very own eyes last year in the playoff bubble. Had that 3-1 lead in the Western Conference semis versus the Denver Nuggets. And that's really after they had to work in the first round to get past the Dallas Mavericks. And, from there, we saw Doc Rivers get his walking papers. We saw a little bit of shuffling with this roster. But the Clippers are still back in the same place regular season wise, but this team is going to ultimately be judged by what they do in the postseason. And like I said, my question to you is, can we trust this team to make that deep run and get out of the West? I mean, this is a team. Let's face it, they've never even gotten to the conference finals, even dating back to the days of the Buffalo Braves or the San Diego Clippers. So, can we trust this team to take that next step?
Well, personally, I say no. I've never been sold on the Clippers. I say their window of opportunity to probably make a move really was last year, but it was before they got into the bubble because it seemed like they had like all the top teams and around the entire NBA. It seemed like they had their numbers in a sense. They were beating up on the Lakers, a couple of guys, a couple of teams that you wouldn't expect them to really be, to really dominate, so to speak. They dominated. It seemed like before they got into the bubble. And I would have thought that if they had a chance last year, was a chance. This year, I'm definitely not sold. But here's a few things I will tell you about this current Clippers team. Number one, they might be probably the one or two deepest teams in the league other than the New Jersey Nets. They're very deep. I believe their defensive efficiency, I believe, is number one right now. I believe they're first in defensive efficiency. I believe they're 11th on the offensive end. And as you know, once you get into the playoffs and you start doing things, the way you win is through your defense, not through your offense. If you play excellent defense and you have timely offense, you got a chance to win through the playoffs and into the finals. But for me, as deep as they are, their roster looks very, very spotty to me. The only thing that I respected about their roster was the fact that the Clippers shoot a very high percentage from three-point land. I think between Reggie Jackson and maybe Kawhi Leonard, they're like the only people that's the main guys that's shooting under 40%. Most of the guys on that team, including Platt Bev and all these guys are shooting like 40%. Nicholas Batum. You go and you take a look at what is it? We call it a playoff Paul whatever. The Paul George dude, George Pearl dude, he's shooting about 42% or something like that. So in the way the league is designed now, you have to be able to shoot that three. But what I think they lack down low is purpose. Between Zubac and you got Mr. DeMarcus Cousins, you got Serge. It's a couple of guys they got down to some bangers, but none of those guys is putting fear. They don't scare anybody with their bigs. So once you get past the Clippers starting five or whoever, or even if you start Rajon Rondo or you bring them off the bench, the Clippers are not scary down low. And I think that's going to be their Achilles heel because if you got a bunch of wing players, we pack it in, you know what I'm saying, depending on how the teams decide to play defense, if they pack it in, Clippers in trouble.
I mean, I look at it, first and foremost, one of the things that the Clippers lacked last year in the postseason was solid point guard play or consistent point guard play. And, you play ball, you know that whatever you can't do, you get exposed at the most inopportune time. And, they got exposed in that last year in the playoffs. They went out there, they acquired Rajon Rondo. I think this is probably it for Rondo. I mean, Rondo, to me, I really don't think Rondo has anything else left to prove in the NBA. You're talking about a two-time NBA champion, one of the better point guards of his era. I know he can be very stubborn at times, which, it's one of those of Rondo. He cannot be on a team for a very long time because eventually he's going to butt heads with the head coaches. I mean, it's happened darn near every place that he's been. So the Clippers are hoping that they can get lightning in a bottle from there. But it's going to come down to their stars. And I'm talking about Kawhi Leonard and I'm talking about Paul George. I mean, Paul George, of course, he was like not in the zone, so to speak, last year in the playoff bubble.
Right.
He wrote about that, talked about he was not feeling well mentally. I get it. But the thing was, Paul George, to me, I think the moment was too big for him, and that's not a slight on him, because it happens to a lot of guys in sports. But I think he is playing better basketball this year. Now it's going to be important for him to transfer that same improved ball that he has had so far throughout this regular season into the playoffs, because ultimately, with the star players and superstar players, that's how you are going to be remembered. And of course, if you're PG-13, you were the man on the Pacers. You got traded to OKC, and now you ended up here with the Clippers, as a sidekick to Kawhi. All this bouncing around and stuff like that, brother. It's time to put up or shut up. Same thing with Kawhi. I think Kawhi still has something to prove because, if you're Kawhi, you left the championship team last year with Toronto to come home. And, in doing so, people are like, well, the grass ain't always greener. And I'm like, bro, you literally left the championship team. So, it's a situation where you've got to put up. And honestly, I think as a whole, it's on the Clippers to go out there and show, because when the coach gets fired, it's one of those where, what, you guys got to step up and prove that Doc wasn't the problem. And I mean, for me, I'm not saying that, I'm not going to go out here and make Doc Rivers a martyr, because Doc Rivers can be stubborn at times. And I think that his philosophy kind of wore out with this club. And of course, the treatment of Kawhi and Paul George as opposed to the rest of the players, of course, that rubs some people the wrong way as well. There does seem to be, a better bit of cohesion right now under
I
Ty
can agree with
Lue,
that.
but it's gotta transfer to the postseason. And I look at the Clippers right now, even dating back to last year, and the problem was bigger last year than it is now. And what that problem is, I've noticed with the Clippers, they play to the level of their competition. If they know that they're going to play the Lakers or the Sixers or the Bucks, they're ready to go. But then, mess around, you have them playing Orlando or Houston or somebody like that, and they can find themselves in a dogfight. So you look at it, and the reason why I bring that up, there's a possibility. It's not, etched in stone, but there is a possibility to the way that the standings are looking right now in the Western Conference. You could potentially have the Clippers and Lakers facing off in round number one. And I mean, a lot of people feel that both of these teams, when healthy, have what it takes to get the title. Of course, a lot of people, even though the Lakers have slid a little bit in the standings, people are looking at them, well, they just got AD back. They're going to get LeBron back, and they're going to be ready to go. So if you are the Clippers, you definitely got to be on top of your game, and you have to bring it.
Well, I agree 100%. Like I said, their roster, they got some solid players there, but it looks like patchwork. I'm going to keep it 100% with you. It's such a fall off from Mr. George Pearl and what he does statistically to the next player. We're talking like he's at 24 PPGs, and the next player you got is the good Morris twin that can play. You got him at 13 points a game.
Sounds about right.
That disparity between the two is high, because then you got Kawhi at like 25.6 points per game, something like that. And then right under him is Mr. George Pearl at 24.0 points per game. And then after that, like, it's an extreme drop. And personally, I think that when you're playing with patchwork and you don't have guys a little bit more established, especially in the paint area, you're gonna have a problem. I think you got Serge Ibaka at like maybe 10 points a game. He isn't gonna affect the game either which way. DeMarcus Cousins at 6 points a game. Uh, Zubac at about 10 or something like that. It's just not formidable. And I'm just gonna keep it 100 with you. I was proved wrong. You can win with jump shooting and swinging the ball, as we saw with the Golden State Warriors, because they weren't very big up front, but they played more cohesively, like as what you pointed out to a little earlier. The cohesion was good, but right now in the Western Conference, the way it looks I'd say from one and 1 to 8, the top three could be flip flopped easy. It could be an easy flip flop with the top three. So we don't really know, but I do know one thing that's for sure: as long as the Lakers is in the middle of that pack, put it to you like this, you're going to see some good playoffs. The Denver Nuggets are right there. You're going to see good playoff play. You got Phoenix. I don't know. I don't know about Phoenix. It's a question mark. I've seen them play. I think they lost to Brooklyn today, if I'm correct, and they were up by a pretty, it looked like a blowout to me for a hot minute. It looked like they was going to get hot, but obviously age and experience plays a big part in what happens with Phoenix. So as you've seen, I didn't watch the game. I saw spurts of it. It looked to me like Kyrie Irving and a couple other guys. I think KD came off the bench about 33 points. Just wasn't enough. I'm also going to say that Utah, I like Utah. But while I like Utah, I feel the same way about Utah as I feel about the Clippers. I don't trust them. I'm not going to take my money and bet on them. It looks like flash in the pan. I think Utah is good defensively. They're not as good as the Clippers are. I think they got a little bit of size to them, but they don't scare anybody on paper either. For as good as they are, and they're pretty cohesive cohesive bunch also. They don't scare anybody. And this is just my thing, William. Like when you say trust, that's like when you go to church and the offer tray comes around, you trust everybody's gonna put in that offer tray. I don't think the Clippers could do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it and, I'm just like going over different scenarios. And like, let's say, there's a possibility that the Clippers do meet the Lakers in the first round. Hypothetically speaking, let's say the Clippers beat the Lakers. And, let's say that series goes 7. They really got to go out there and do what they got to do, to defeat the defending champs. With that said, even though the Clippers have a new head coach, the Clippers still have the mentality where, you know what, they'll go out there and beat the Lakers in that series, but then they'll turn right back around and lose their next series. So this is these are the things that I try to say, because, we'll have a situation with the Clippers where they'll beat the Sixers and they'll beat Milwaukee in consecutive nights, but then they'll turn around and lose by 15 to Detroit at home. And those are the things you can't do. You got to go out there and handle your business on a night in and night out basis. And I know, like, the whole thing with the resting guys, this, that, and the third. My whole thing is this: the Clippers are shooting better from the perimeter this season, but still, I've always said that Kawhi and Paul George are at their best when they're getting to the basket. And not only getting to the basket, but when they're posting up, because Paul George at the small forward position, he has a lot of length, long arms. He can, get over most of the guys who are guarding him at that position. But like sometimes, guys tend to fall in love with that outside shot, and that's one
Right.
thing that hurt the Clippers last year in the postseason. I think this time around, having a more seasoned floor general like Rajon Rondo, and he's one of the old school guys at that position. And the reason why I say that, because, a lot of teams are going with this position-less basketball. And at the end of the day, you need yourself a floor general, especially in the postseason, to take over
Agreed.
and say, listen, you know what, this is how we're going to do. Let's slow down and let's get into a rhythm. So I'm looking at the Clippers. It's one of those where, you want to say maybe this is it, but at the end of the day, for me, I'm like, a leopard doesn't change its spots. And I mean, I'm with you. I look at how deep that the West is. I know that there are going to be some people out there, not the teams in the Western Conference, but fans and analysts who are going to, fall out of love a little bit with the Denver Nuggets, of course, after the
Right.
Jamal Murray injury. This is still going to be a very tough out. I know Will Barton has a hamstring injury. He'll probably be back for the postseason. They picked up Austin Rivers, but Denver has a solid system. They are going to miss Jamal Murray. I'm not going to dance around the floor on that one.
Oh, they done without him. So as far as I'm concerned, he's the reason why they even got into the second round of the playoffs.
Right.
He went at it with Utah. Was it Utah last year? I mean, those are some great games. It was like
with
looking
Donovan
at
Mitchell.
That's right. It was some great games.
Right.
I actually watched a couple of the end of some of those games, and they was going 50-50 at each other.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, but, that was more like kind of like in a sense like you go on and you catch a good game in a YMCA and everybody's on fire hot.
Right.
And then, like I said, once you get hot, you ride the coattails of being hot. And what I think we're seeing to a certain extent from the Lakers, I think the Lakers is playing hide and seek. I think they're trying to get as healthy as they can. I don't know how many games is left in the season, but I don't expect to see their core together until maybe the last 2 games, maybe last 3 games of the season, if even that, to try to get some rhythm going into the playoffs. I think they're holding out. What do you think? Because I'm looking at, like I said, you look at that Clippers roster, Terrence Mann and all them guys on that roster. They're deep. They can flip flop the matchups, but it's just down in a post. They don't look strong enough. As unimpressed as I am with the Lakers post players, has AD. Drummond is okay, but sometimes he look like he got 2 left hands. So I'm not sold on Drummond yet offensively. Defensively, he's okay. He's going to board. But as down as I am on the Lakers, the Clippers, they don't move me, William. They don't move me.
Listen, they, even more than the Nuggets, I really say that the Clippers are, to me, I think the ultimate wild card, in that Western Conference this year, because, I really think like this. I think the Lakers are laying in the weeds. And, my whole thing is this. I think shame on some of those teams in the Western Conference for being unable to take care of their business without LeBron and AD. I look at Denver. Denver was able to surpass the Lakers in the standings. Right now, if the season ended today, they would meet. And even with Jamal Murray, that would still be a good series.
It's going.
I'm looking at Portland. Portland's right there as well.
That's right.
If you're Portland, you definitely want to try to overtake the Lakers and try to get to that 6th spot. And then, you're looking at a team like Dallas down there. Dallas definitely wants to try to avoid having to go to that play-in scenario right now, which I think is a money grab and a waste of time. That's a whole other topic for another day. But you look at it right now, this year in the Western Conference, I'm looking at it. The teams that I'm looking who have the potential to make the NBA Finals out of the West
Right.
are not the top 2 teams. Typically, when you go to a postseason scenario, you say, well, you know what? Okay, the road, basically like how it was back in the 90s, the road to the East, or from the to the NBA Finals out of the East went through Chicago, and Chicago was typically the number 1 seed, and you're like, man, I got to go out there and face them. And if Chicago wasn't the 1 seed, they were typically the 2 seed. You look at it right now in the East, and it's probably going to be one of your top 2 seeds. It's either going to be Brooklyn or it's going to be Philly to come out of the East. But flipping it to the West, you look at your top 2 teams right now, Utah and Phoenix, and it's just like nobody's really, gung-ho, like, okay, wow, you know what, we got to go face Utah in the playoffs. Wow, we got to go face Phoenix in the playoffs. No, it's the teams after that people are worried about. People are worried. Like, listen, I'll tell you like this. If you have to face Denver, even without Jamal Murray, Jokic is probably going to be the MVP. That's going to be a problem right there. You never know what you're going to get from Portland, because Damian Lillard could start going at it in a series and drop 40 a night. You have Dallas. Porzingis can never stay healthy, but you still have Doncic. Doncic is another one of those guys. He can get in his zone and, just get out of his way. And, I mean, we've seen what LeBron could do in the postseason for a very long time. So, LeBron could go at it and get everybody involved and get on a run. So you're looking at the teams who are a little bit lower in the pecking order, so to speak, in the Western Conference. And definitely you throw the Clippers into that mix as well. And those are the teams that I think, put the most fear in me. So, I mean, I'm looking at the Clippers definitely getting back to the originality of this subject and podcast here. They've got to go out there and take care of their business. But also, this might be a scenario where, it might be a situation where you might not end up having to face a certain team. Because if the standings finished or ended the way that they are right now, the Clippers go into the playoffs as a 3 seed, the Lakers go in as a 5 seed. So, if you're the Clippers, you don't have to face the Lakers until you get to the Western Conference Finals. If
Correct.
you get to the Western
Yeah.
Conference Finals. But with that said, who knows what type of conditioning physically that the Lakers are going to be in? Because, like, if the Lakers, were to face the Nuggets in the first round, and if the Lakers get past Denver, even without Jamal Murray, the Lakers are going to have to earn it. I mean, they got past Denver in 5 games last year, but it wasn't like a cakewalk. They had to work to get past the Nuggets. I mean, what helped the Lakers in that series was the fact that, Denver had consecutive 7-game series in their first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And I think part of that was they were a little out of gas. And of course, that big shot by AD to end game 2 kind of like broke the spirit of the Nuggets, so to speak. But with that said, you never know. With that said, this could be a scenario where it's not about who you face, but who you don't have to face to get out. But the Clippers, they have to take care of their business. I think, Ty Lue having that championship experience, could account for something because he's still a guy that, does command some respect. I mean, even when he was coaching Cleveland, he was not, it was not above him to put LeBron in his place. And I mean, it's tough for a coach in the present day NBA to sit down the greatest player in your league or like talk to, in a stern way, the greatest player in your league. And, Ty Lue did it. So I think that is definitely something that could, work in a favor of the Clippers. But I look at them and I say, hey, you know what? They are an enigma. And I am hoping for their sake, I'm not a Clippers fan, but I'm hoping for their sake that, they understand the severity of the moment because they basically became a laughing stock last year after what happened in the bubble. And hopefully that resonated with them to the point that they say, hey, listen, you know what? Not on our watch. You need some guys in your team that, hate to lose more than they enjoy winning. And last year they thought it was going to be given to them. It's not going to be given to them. It's going to take a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Ty Lue knows that because he knows what it takes to win a championship. He won as a player with the Lakers and, of course, as a head coach with Cleveland. Kawhi has won with 2 different organizations, 2 of the better run organizations in the NBA, might I add. So it's going to be up to him to kind of step his game up. Rondo knows what it takes to win in this league as well. He's won with 2 of the better organizations as well. So you look at it now, and the onus is on the Clippers, but I think the onus is going to be on their big guys. And like I said before, Paul George has shown improvement here in the regular season, but it won't mean a thing if you have a similar performance, if you're Paul George, to what you had last year in the playoff bubble.
You talking about George Pearl. So here's the deal with it. I'm going to tell you something. I listened very thoughtfully to what you said. And the Clippers roster, they do have some guys on their team that have some playoff experience, but collectively their team doesn't have enough playoff experience. All right, so let's keep that in perspective as well. Now you got George Pearl, you got Kawhi Leonard, you got Serge Ibaka, you got Rondo. Let's see, who else got a little bit of experience? Who else was championship type of players? Okay, they got a lot of playoff experience. Beyond maybe, and I believe the good Morris twin got a little playoff experience. Beyond those guys, I think Reggie Jackson got some. Collectively, my point is not enough experience. All right, to say, I look at the Denver Nuggets as a more seasoned playoff team coming off of what they came out of last year. All right, they look more seasoned to me than, say, the Clippers, Phoenix, and even Utah. And this is what I'm trying to say. Like, a lot of these teams, they're young, and they're looking good in certain aspects, and the regular season is the regular season, but I'm gonna call it like I see it. I believe experience wins this year, bro. And that experience is gonna boil down to, I would say, the bottom three and down under, as far as in the Western Conference, the playoff teams. Forget the top three, bottom three. Now I'm gonna go over here into the East real quick to get my point across. After you have, let's say, you got the New Jersey Nets, they got a boatload of experience. The Sixers, see, that's the Achilles heel with them. We don't know what we're gonna get. You would expect for them to be formidable, being how they look in the regular season, but we don't know. Underneath them, you got the reindeer dudes, the Bucks. All right, the Bucks again have a lot of playoff experience, but they basically have died hard every single year. We watch them and we see, the glaring what they're missing every single playoff. And then you could just go down the levels. So for me, I'm looking at the most experienced playoff teams, regardless of where they finish at, to be the teams that's going to command a chance to get into their prospective conference finals. And I will keep it 100 with you because I can't, I don't, as good as some of these teams look in the regular season, I think that playoff experience and that know-how and being able to play under pressure, because it looked like the Clippers cracked last year. They folded under the pressure. And then they had every excuse in the book, from the coach to what was happening in the locker room, lemon pepper Lou out with women hanging out in the club, COVID-19 protocol, different things that was going on with these guys that when you're trying to win a championship, and I know it's very difficult to keep everybody together in the bubble for 3 months, but if your goal is a championship, it wasn't going to get no easier or no harder than that. So this year, prospectively, everybody has to go play in everybody's home. So now you're not in one place playing. So if you go home and you have home court advantage, say the Clippers got home court advantage, and they lose any one of them home games and got to go to somebody else's home, bruh, I'm not sold at all. And I'm just going to tell you like that. I like Tyronn Lue. I think he's decent. And I think Lawrence Frank is his executive head coach also. I think he's his guy also. That coaching staff there did pretty good this year in keeping the young guys focused and keeping them from talking so much, because that was the biggest problem with the Clippers last year, is they were doing a lot of talking. And they were good up until the bubble. Once the bubble came, the focus came off. Montrezl Harrell kind of messed that team up last year to a certain extent. He had some issues personally. Then he came back and he questioned the authority and the moves that Doc Rivers was making with Kawhi Leonard and George Pearl. He was letting these guys do different things that they shouldn't have been doing. As far as, team-wise, you need your team together. I can't have my top player in Kawhi Leonard. He lives in San Diego. Guess what, people? San Diego is 3 hours away from Los Angeles. So every single day, whether he's helicoptering in or he's taking a private jet or whatever he's doing, he's spending more time traveling than he is in the gym. Then they got the load management issues, which I think was disgusting last year. I think we discussed this with him. For people who pay their money, if I pay my money, I want to see George Pearl. I don't want to see Terrence Mann. I don't want to see Serge Ibaka. I want to see George Pearl, and that's just my point. And with him, it's mental, and I think it's also mental with Kawhi. Kawhi just shows it less, so it looks like there's no real leader on that Clippers team. Who's going to be the leader? Rondo can talk all he wants, but his play does not match what he can say even this year. He had some good games, but to me, it didn't matter if they got Rondo or not this year. Rondo got his money. He got another chance to play in the playoffs. I don't think he'll be as impactful with the Clippers as he was with the Lakers because of the dynamics of the two teams and also the mentality. I thought the Clippers were soft last year, and guess what, William? They're still soft this year. That's right. You bring in DeMarcus Cousins, and again, his bark is better than his bite right now, and this is what you're seeing. He's so good. Dude never recovered, man, and I feel bad about that young man, losing his superpowers, so to speak, on the basketball court. But overall, and to kind of round things up to you, I don't trust them. I don't know what their discipline is, but like I said, again, they're number 1 in official rating efficiency, and they're number 11 in offensive efficiency. And I know that those two things, you need to be in good high numbers in order to win a championship. So, the jury is out on George Pearl and Kawhi Leonard. We'll see what happens.
Well, there you have it, from Cal 1 to God. As always, it's a pleasure to do this with you.
Yes, sir.
For all you fine folks out there, you can check Cal Wonder God out on Facebook at New York Underground Radio, as well as Citywide Sports. If you like what you heard here, please feel free to click on that subscribe button. And you can always check me out on Twitter at 300 pounds of sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. And there is also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So for Cal One to God, my name is William Martin,
Sir.
aka 300 pounds of sports knowledge. Take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.
Peace.